Bruh. Hello, gamers. And happy Monday. I do hope my microphone levels are good. I was re-listening to a couple of streams for the VOD. They still have to publish. And the sound clipped a little bit. I also might have to figure out a way to change the reverb in this room, but yeah. Hopefully it won't be that bad. I just have to find a way to move my microphone so that is close enough to my mouth that I can actually still see my keyboard when I'm using it. Or I have to move it out of the way. Find an orientation that works for everyone. Oh. Hopefully you had a good weekend. Most of my weekend has been spent editing the VODs. Learning how to use KDN Live. And then messing up in between. Hi, Amda. Hello again. Yeah, it turns out that if you edit the stream and then you upload it, and the connection dies in the middle, you should not be deleting the rendered file, because then you will have to re-render it, and rendering a 3-hour the stream takes about 3 hours, even in this machine, which is not fun. Then every time I publish a VOD, I have to it's not just a pressing a button. I wish it were. I have to go through the video and then find all the places and then add a marker for YouTube to subdivide the video in chapters, which means I have to watch myself over and over and over and over again. I usually watch myself at twice the speed, so the voice changes in a way that doesn't make myself, that I don't make myself cringe too much. So, but still. Does GTK fully support multi-touch screens? Yes. It's kind of a tricky question. If your kernel supports multi-touch screens, and then libinput should be supporting multi-touch screens. And if libinput supports multi-touch screens, then your multi-touch screen, then GTK will support multi-touch screen for you. It's not really GTK's responsibility to support hardware. GTK only supports whatever hardware is available in terms of underlying windowing system and like operating system. That also applies to any other device like trackpad or like a touchpad. If your kernel does not support it and does not enable more than like a couple of touch points, then GTK cannot do anything about it. But if your kernel supports it, then it's perfectly fine. If yeah, there are a couple of I think I read a couple of cases where people were using a touchpad on some laptop and it didn't work, or at least it didn't expose more than a couple of touch points. That was missing support in the Linux kernel. There's nothing GTK can do about it. I need to remember to move my other web browser window. I cannot close it. I have too many tabs open, and reconstructing my tab set is too much work. So I'm running currently and a few web browser windows. So every time I focus switch to another window, I have to remember not to expose my private email, because then I have to do things like editing the VOD so I can blur my private email, which is not great. I mean, it's fine, I can do it, but it takes a long while. It's one of the tricky things of streaming. You have to set up your streaming environment so it resembles your session, but it's not really it doesn't expose private stuff, because you're running on your computer. Another thing that happened during this weekend is that I ended up again on Phoronix, which is not something I particularly enjoy. Yeah, I ended up twice on Phoronix this month. And yeah, I don't like when that happens. I barely like it when I end up on LWN. I ended up on Phoronix twice. It's mostly because then not only I get an alert, but also I end up reading the Phoronix comment forum, which is something that nobody should ever do. To be fair, the Phoronix comment forum has a very specific effect on my self-esteem, and in general on my life, mostly because whatever stupid shit I say or whatever bad thing that happened during that day or during that week, I feel instantly better, because as terrible as my life is or could be, it will never be as bad as the life of the people commenting on Phronix. Hi, Cheap Will. No, it's not better than Reddit. It's not better than Reddit at all. I mean, they took the bar of Reddit and just, I don't know how or why, but it's lower than that. It's terrifyingly stupid. Like, the last thing I ended up on Phronix was I removed a bunch of code from Cairo. Great. And one of the things that I wrote on the merge request for removing the bunch of code from Cairo is that I removed the only 2 reasons why Cairo depends on a C++ compiler, which is just a bunch of implications in terms of complexity of the build system, and especially auto tools, and the complexity of the CI pipeline. It's a very minor thing compared to the rest of the fact that, hey, it's 40,000 lines of code that we don't get to maintain anymore, and they were not tested at all, so might as well drop them. And the Phronix commentariat decided to latch on the C++ bit and started going for 2 pages of their forum, like of their web forum software, arguing about C and C++ in the stupidest way possible. There are many ways that you can argue about C and C++. They chose to settle on the stupidest way possible. And I read that and I instantaneously lost, I think at the very least 20 points of IQ. It's just, it was just so stupid. It was so dumb. Yeah, I at that point I basically just said, okay. I won't read any further, because otherwise I will just feel depressed about the state of humanity. But yeah, that's the usual experience of Phronix comments. They're just dumb in the most stupid way possible. I mean, Reddit looks like a collection of geniuses compared to Phronix. Oh well. But yeah, it raises my, it makes me feel stupider, and in the, not in the sense of, oh, these are very intelligent people and I look like I'm dumber than them. No, it makes me feel stupider because I have to lower myself to their level. And it's way worse than Reddit in that regard. So please don't go on Phronix. Please don't read Phronix. Please don't go on Phronix. It's a bad idea for everyone involved. I know a bunch of like managers that, I don't know if they go purposely on Phronix or if they like read Phronix for other reasons, but I know of teams and inside commercial entities that literally use Phronix as a metric, saying, oh, the phonics benchmark improved and it's good. This month we made the phonics benchmark like post or whatever. It's like, really? Don't you have anything better to do? Don't you have like actual real metrics that you can employ instead of relying on phonics? Well, such is the state of the world. Sadness. And I've said multiple times, people involved in the free software community from the creation perspective, so people that maintain, write, contribute to free software projects should never go on well-known toxic places like Reddit, Phoronix, when it was a thing, Slashdot, other web forums like OMG Ubuntu and stuff like that. They should never ever go there and read stuff. And if they do, they should never ever read the comments. And if they do, they should never ever reply to the people leaving comments there. It's just a complete lose-lose proposition for everyone involved, except the trolls. So, and yet, here we are. I'm going to say yes, the GNOME Discourse is the best place for a healthy discussion, mostly because of two reasons. One, it can be moderated in a way that is not a mallet. It's not like, oh, I'm going to remove stuff. Instead, people that have the moderation bit on Discourse can literally take like a subthread and move it to another topic, or they can actually take multiple topics and merge them into one. Discourse is a lot better in terms of forum software than any other forum that I've seen. But the other thing that makes the GNOME Discourse instance a lot better is that it's heavily moderated. If people are acting like little shits, they will be flagged and either banned or just put in a timeout or anything else. So no shadow banning, nothing like that. You will get stuff moved away, or you will get banned, and moderation is actually fairly strict. But in general, also, if you go on the GNOME Discourse forum, it means you are coming on GNOME's turf. So you're willing to establish, at the very least, a communication channel. You're willing to engage with the GNOME community or the GNOME maintainers. If you're on Reddit, if you're on, I don't know, like Phoronix, it means they have to come to your place, and then you have the home advantage in the sense that you can basically insult them without incurring on any repercussion, which means you can be as abrasive and needlessly confrontational as you want, because you will not suffer any consequence for that. Whereas if you go on the GNOME Discourse, people are abrasive anyway. I have to put people on timeouts for that multiple times. But the overall idea is that if you come to the GNOME builder, it's because you want to have a discussion. Sorry, to the GNOME Discourse, not GNOME builder. I have GNOME builder in front of me, so if you come to the GNOME Discourse, you are willing to have a discussion. You're willing to talk to people instead of like talk at them. At least in theory. It mostly happens. Sometimes people just shout random stuff, but that stuff usually gets eliminated pretty quickly. So So theoretically speaking, there are places where you can go on there. You can also, in theory, go on the GNOME subreddit, even because it's heavily moderated, though the GNOME subreddit has its own issues. Basically, you're on Reddit. The GTK subreddit is also reasonable. I'm one of the mods there, but the people that ask questions there are usually asking for a specific question, so they are asking for help, which means it's possible to establish a conversation. They're using the subreddit as they would use Stack Overflow, for instance. So it's not a place for generic discussion about, I don't know, why GTK doesn't do X or why GTK does Y. So I find that places where you ask specific questions in order to get specific answers are the best. Mostly not because they are more formal, but because people are more are primed to have some sort of exchange in a civil exchange, because you're trying to get something out of something else or somebody else. So if you're asking for help, you're not gonna come in and punch me in the face. That is the theory. In some cases, people have been coming over and just started wildly moving their arms, like flailing around. Why doesn't it do this? And that usually, if you can calm people down, they will then work with you in order to solve a problem or their problem. But yeah, it's not great otherwise. Whereas on generic forums where people just go there and basically just vent, or are not technical, or are not interested in getting, they're interested in basically just putting stuff out. It's a bit like Twitter in that regard. So you don't go on Twitter because you're having a problem, or sorry, no, you don't go on Twitter in order to get a solution. You get there because you have a problem and you're venting. You're basically just random rants. So you're not entirely interested in other people coming over and talking to you. It's more broadcasting than it is having a connection. still, people ask questions on the GTK Twitter account as well. Or at the very least, they ask at the GTK Twitter account. Which is weird. Have you ever tried helping somebody on like a constrained platform with 200 like characters available? Especially when it comes with code? It's awful. Why do people use Twitter for that? Jesus. But yeah, if you want to have a discussion about GTK or GNOME or whatever, then please use Discourse. It's a lot better than basically all alternatives. Okay. Oh, another thing that I've done last week on Friday, and then I had to clean it up during the weekend because there were a couple of issues there, a couple of bugs in the code examples, was finishing the getting started tutorial. It's done, I'd say. At the very least, it's done to the extent which I'm comfortable with for GNOME 42. I'll probably add some more stuff there. I'll probably add some more lessons about interesting stuff to do when you're starting out, like the interesting bits of showing libadwaita with the toast and the color scheme selector, for instance. Those were kind of interesting, not incredibly useful out of the box, but they allowed us to talk about error checking and storing preferences and stuff like that, and updating menus. But I think there is nothing incredibly useful there left. One thing that I could add would be a lesson on how to open files using the command line, which would be an interesting addition to the documentation because people ask for that. But command line is always kind of problematic. You're not really supposed to interact a lot with the command line. If I wanted to add that, then I would need to, for instance, modify the desktop file to allow you to launch an application with a file and then register the MIME type handler for the text viewer, so you can also launch the application when like right-clicking on a text file. I would have to add limitations on the kind of text files you can open. That goes on and on and on. That might be better suited for a specific tutorial, like how to open files. So implementing the open action in G application, implementing MIME type handling inside your desktop file, and so on and so forth. So that is a thing you can do, but it's probably not a getting started thing. But for the time being, I think the getting started tutorial is done. Which means that we can concentrate on something else instead of documentation writing. At the very least, maybe for this week. But this week we're gonna stick on... well, I was thinking about doing some libadwaita hacking this week. So instead of writing documentation, we can write some code. I still have the tagged entry branch that I need to work on, and I wanted to do some light tweaks to the, well, not API tweaks because the API is stable now, but adding some convenience API that I noticed while using it. So let me switch to my desktop. And I'm already on libadwaita. So one of the things that I noticed during like the work on the getting started tutorial was that the Toast API is fairly limited when it comes to presenting text to the user. You can set a title to your toast, both when constructing it and as a separate setter. But most of the time, it's unlikely that you will present to the user a static string, so a string that it's already complete, especially in C. In other languages like Python, for instance, or JavaScript, or even in Rust, you have formatted strings that are native to the language. But in C, you only have bytes array. And then you use stuff like G stirred up printf to construct a string, a newly allocated string from a format string, like printf style format string. And we do have that kind of API elsewhere in GTK. Let me see. We have that in the message dialog, which is probably the closest thing to Toast or user notification. Of course, a user notification does not use a separate window. It's embedded inside your application. So, but it's still, in spirit, essentially just a pop-up that says, hey, something happened. Press OK to dismiss it. And the C constructor for GTK message dialog new takes a format string and then a list of arguments for that formatted string. Whereas Adwaita Toast, the toast object, takes a fixed string. So you only gets the title, which is fine. As I said, it's not a huge deal. But what I'm missing is some convenience API that takes a format string and then a series of arguments for that format string. So maybe we should have a separate constructor that allows us to golf a little bit. Let me see first. We only have we only have available in all because the API hasn't been branched yet, I think. But I suspect that will happen soon. In any case, we don't particularly care right now. So let's just use available in all. And let's add something like this. Okay. So this is going to be a C only convenience function. the constructor itself is a C-only convenience function. The constructors in other languages do not use the C API there. They use the generic GObject new API, which is why in Python we can do things like this. So we can do toast equals adv toast title. So we don't really care about formatting strings there because we can use Python format strings directly at construction time. But in C, we probably want to have something like that. So we should also have GNOME unused result. So theoretically, we can now do something like this. And use printf style format strings. In theory, whenever you see a function that takes a variadic argument, variadic arguments, so the ... here, you should also provide a vector-based version of that. So essentially, you provide a way to pass an argument and an array of argument. You pass a way to write a function that lets you pass an array of arguments. In this case, we don't do that because it's pointless. The other thing you can do is, instead of using this, well, instead of also providing a VA list version, so something like this. Now, this is unnecessary in this case, and I'm saying it in this case. I don't want people to take away the wrong message. So this function here is going to be marked as not introspectable, so it won't be visible to language bindings. Again, fine. This function here will also not be visible to language bindings because language bindings have no idea what a VA list even is. So it's pointless. The only reason why would you add this function here is if you wanted to create your own wrapper with variadic arguments around ADB toast new format. So if you add like function like I don't know, my toast new, and then inside this function you would be able to call this function here after you got the variadic arguments inside a VA list. Again, I don't think this is worth it. I think it's kind of pointless. If you want to write your own variadic argument wrapper around ADW toast new, then you have well, you have this, and you also have this. You can construct it yourself anyway. So I don't think it's useful. I don't think it's I actually think it's kind of pointless in this case. If we were talking about something like very low level, like GObject set. GObject set is a function with a variadic arguments, so it can take it can take a list of key property names and property values. At that point, you also want to have a vector base. So now you have GObject set v, that takes an array of property names and an array of property values. You also get a GObject set VA list, which takes a VA list that represents property names and property values. And you also have GObject set property, which only takes one property name and one property value. So that is the typical use case for adding additional wrappers around it, like additional API around variadic arguments. But GObject set is a very, very low level piece of machinery. So you want to have more options there, because you might want to write your own wrapper around, your own C wrapper around GObject set. But you also have language bindings, and language bindings will not be able to use set and set VA list, but they will use GObject set v, the vector based one, or GObject set property, and then have their own vector and iterate over their own native data structure. So that case is completely different. It's very low level, and you want to expose as much as possible to language bindings and to other C libraries. In this case, it's a toast. It's a toast, and we are adding convenience function to be able to format a string. Done. You don't need anything else. The toast API, or the toast object, already has enough API for you to implement this stuff manually. So let's reindent this, and then we can go toast. Like, for instance, in here you can see we need to add a bunch of stuff there. This is a bad example, actually. Oh no, it's reasonable, but yeah. But yeah, instead of using self-undo toast with title here, we can do adw toast new format, and like we can change it slightly and do new format here, and then well, let me copy the this is actually a bad example because it's not using n items there. Actually, this entire example is really, really bad. What the heck? Wow. Okay. Yikes. Yeah. Okay. No, we have to fix the example as well. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, we're adding a toast with a bunch of bad things. Yeah, no, that was a very bad example. Sorry. But yeah. toast. So the original example added computed the title, and then set a bunch of stuff here, and then added the toast. And in case the undo toast didn't exist. But the main problem is that in order to make a string that has n items deleted support plural forms, you have to use n gigatext in this case, and you have to pass the singular format and the plural format. This way, languages that have different, like they have multiple ways to express that information depending on the number, will be able to select the correct form. So for instance, if you have one element, it will be one element deleted, but if you have two, will be a certain format, or if you have 5, less than 5, it will be another format, and less than 10, another format, and so on and so forth. Languages are interesting that way. But yeah, you really don't want to do that, like neutral, completely non-localized here, and then the localized version after that. That was not a great example. But yeah, no, in this case it's perfect. It's fine. We can fix it that way. So let's go inside our constructor here. This one is pretty simple. The other version that we want to do works like this. New format are here, then a bunch of dots. So the first thing we want to do is to do oh, that's why. Oh, that's a very bad idea. Yikes. That's a very, very bad idea. Okay, so the example will have to do something like this. Where are you? Yeah, you cannot pass null. You have to pass an empty string. Why? No. But yeah. So. So the way variadic arguments work in C, if you've never seen this, it's kind of an interesting bit of functionality. Let's add an include here, so we are okay with it. We have to add it here. So variadic arguments in C are kind of funny. They all depend on the fact that C is kind of funny language. When you call a C function, the arguments are not really something you pass. Let's say, how do I explain this in a way that doesn't make me sound like a complete lunatic? You're not actually passing the arguments to the function. You are, well, the compiler is taking all the arguments you call the function with, and then it puts them on a stack, and then jumps into the function with that stack. What does it mean? It means that, for instance, you have a function that takes four arguments in its prototype. And then you pass it with more than 4 arguments, like 5, 10, 15 arguments. The C language will let you do that. It will not let you pass fewer arguments than the function expects, but if you're passing more arguments, why not? I mean, you have to use function pointers and generic functions, so if you have to cast a function so that the compiler will not try to tell you, oh, you're passing more arguments that the function has declared. But if you have a function pointer, like any function pointer, so a pointer to a function, and then you call it with more arguments than the function itself has declared, then the C language will happily let you do that. It will not bat an eye about that. That's how the entirety of the G object signal mechanism works. That's why you cast. So whenever you call G signal connect, like here, let's just say that, let's use G signal connect swap, this is fine. Every time you call G signal connect, you pass a G callback. Because it's a generic function, right? G callback is literally a function that returns void, so returns nothing and takes nothing. But a signal can be defined to take an arbitrary amount of arguments and return an argument instead of returning nothing. How does that work? It works because when we call dismiss CB here as a function pointer, we pass it all the arguments that we want. So like my window here, a pointer to like a generic pointer here. And C will happily let you do that. You can pass like 15 arguments. Of course, dismiss CB, for instance, doesn't use anything else, only use my window self, but the implementation will pass a G pointer argument to this that is undeclared here, for instance, because we don't use it. But the signal emission for dismissed will include that argument. It's not there. And the reason why it all works and it's not completely undefined behavior is that it's needed to implement variadic arguments to a function. So you have a function that takes at minimum an argument here, the const char format, and then it can take a bunch of arguments. How many? Doesn't matter. The amount of arguments is dictated by the format string. But the function itself doesn't know how many arguments there are. So that's why the ellipsis here is needed. It says the compiler, this function takes an undefined number of arguments. It must be greater than 1, but otherwise it doesn't matter. And the way it's implemented here is with this type called VA list. And the VA list is basically a way to tell the compiler, hey, I'm going to iterate. So assign an argument, assign a variable to the position in the stack of the function that follows the format argument here. And basically set args here, this variable to be whatever comes after format inside the stack. And now we can iterate over it. In reality, we are not going to iterate over it because we are going to build a format. We're going to build an actual string out of the format string. In order to do that, we are going to use a glib function. Let's just go and and we're going to use this function here. So this function here is exactly like g-stringed up printf, but instead of taking the format string and variadic arguments here, it takes the VA list. So basically it says, I'm going to read all the arguments in the stack that are pointed by the args parameter, and then we'll use the format string to basically determine how much I have to peek into the stack to build that. So we're going to do this here, and we're going to do stuff like and then we are going to do return g object new. We'll have to free it, and we cannot use g-auto-free because it's we cannot use g-auto-free because apparently people want to build libadwaita on Windows using the Visual C toolchain, which means we have to accommodate that. So we free the title and return the press. Embed it properly here. Okay. So this is how you typically how do you typically implement variadic argument function in C. You mark the beginning of the argument and then the end when you don't use them anymore. And inside this region of code here, you can do whatever you want. You can iterate over them. You can iterate over every single argument by recovering their, if you, of course, you have to know the type, you have to know how big they are and what kind of type you're getting. Otherwise, C will happily give you whatever you're asking, and if you read outside of the boundaries of the type, then you will get a very nice segmentation fault, because that's how C rolls. So let's add a documentation stanza here. Hello, Rednoff. And yeah, peace and love. Let's see how we document this. Method to insert in the following string. We can copy it. Create a new ADW toast. That toast will use the format string as its it's called toast returns newly created. It's 1.2 right now. Okay. Yeah, this is a very simple thing. We could conceivably think about adding a set format title, or set title format version of this function as well. But to be honest, it's a lot easier. It's probably a lot more. It's more likely that people will use ADW toast new format than it is they will use new format and then set title format. Do we have a test somewhere? Test toast. Yeah. Let's see. I don't see other things here. We could add a very simple version here of our test. And then we can do post equals new format and do something like this. So no. And then do G object get toast title. And then we do G assert compare string. Title and set finalize object. GSR-finalize object is a new convenience macro / function in the glib test suite API. Basically, what it does is it will release a reference on the GObject instance that you pass, and it will verify that it was the last reference. So it will ensure that your that the instance was finalized at the end. It's useful to inside test suite to verify that you're not leaking references in your normal operation, normal mode, in your regular API. So we're creating a new instance of toast object. It should have a single reference, which is yours essentially, which means that this function should never fail. If it fails, it means that something else inside the toast object acquired a reference on it, and we definitely don't want that. Okay, so we need to add the test to the suite. We had it very top. Title format. So let's build it. The tests are available in the builder project. Ah, yeah, that was dumb. Yes, I know. And then we can go on test toast. It will run it and it will succeed. Title format works perfectly fine. Again, that was a very, very simple change. So okay. Toast. Add convenience inspector. It's convenient. Colors of ADW toast new will likely try and pass a formatted string instead of requiring additional step outside the constructor to allocate using test. It might be more convenient to provide background out of the box. An example is a toast overlay at toast. No, I'm going to break the line there. Answer is GNOME Builder 42 use libadwaita for new projects? Yes. GNOME Builder 42, the templates for new projects will use libadwaita. They will use libadwaita for basically every language. They have been updated. Libadwaita is going to be in the GNOME 42 runtime, so the manifest will already be updated to deal with that. And the templates themselves will use libadwaita as well. So instead of creating, sorry, let me explain a little bit better. You will have 3 templates for GUI applications. The first one is going to be the GNOME template, which will use GTK4 and libadwaita. So you create a new application. The application will be an adwaita application. Then you will have a GTK application, which will only use GTK4. And the third one is going to be a GTK legacy application, which will use GTK3. But yeah, if you ask for a GNOME application is going to be GTK4 and libadwaita. So you won't have to do anything to modify whatever you get out of the box. And now we add the test. And then I saw something before that I didn't particularly like. You don't need to include the entirety of GTK here. You only need chilled object. And you need to include GIO inside the toast itself. You should never include a ton of stuff inside your header file. It's a very bad habit. So you should always limit the amount of headers you include inside your header file for 2 reasons. One, header inclusion is a preprocessor operation. That means you're literally copy-pasting all the contents of all the headers you include inside your own header, which means inside your source file. So when you include gtk/gtk.h, you're actually including all the GTK headers recursively, which also means that at the end, when we include adw toast private, you're actually including all of GTK. Where is toast private? Here. So yeah, you're including everything, which means that every time you include adw toast.h, even inside your own library, you include that. But the other thing is that, so inside your public header, you should always only include the header definitions. Well, you should only include the headers of the types you use. So in this case, we only care about GObject here, because it's the topmost type that we care about. Because it's the only thing we care about, really. Yeah. And then inside your source file, you will include everything else that you need for that source file. So standard arg, because we're using VA list, and GIO because we're using gaction. At the end of the day, in adwaita, in libadwaita, exactly like in GTK, you're including a single header. This is needed for a variety of reasons, but suffice to say, you're including gtk.h or adwaita.h. That is fine, because whenever you're using libadwaita, you're using the entirety of the API of libadwaita. Even if you're using like one function, it doesn't matter. But internally, in order to speed up compilation and in order to ensure that the library doesn't have extraneous like dependencies that you don't notice, is to always limit the amount of inclusion that you do. So in this case, a toast is an object, which means, and the API doesn't deal with anything else, so include glib-object. And then inside the toast implementation, you add a bunch of other, you include whatever you need. So you only include gio.h whenever you are building ADW toast, which means that ADW toast compiles a little bit faster because it doesn't have to include a ton of other headers. Hi, Jeff. So let me commit this bit. Okay, so let's open a merge request for this. Again, it's convenience API, so I don't particularly care if it gets merged or not, but it's it's fine. So let's, okay. Good. So let's switch back to the main branch. We need to close this file first. Okay. All the merge requests are open still. Custom title here. Oh. Okay. This is another thing that will probably generate a conflict with my merge request, but it's fine. And this is my merge request for tagged entry. Again, I don't particularly expect stuff to move that quickly. We are close to GNOME 42. It's going to be released pretty quickly now. Let me. Yeah, we have the string freeze already passed, and we have a code freeze in about less than a week. And once the code freeze is in, yeah, we have the release candidate on the 5th of March, and we are in code freeze. And then 2 weeks later, we have the 42.0 release. So it's going to be a stable release there. And between these two boundaries, we have only translation updates. Then we will have the documentation, and we will have the release notes writing. So actually I expect release notes, well, I expect the next couple of weeks to be pretty hectic. In general, people can do changes in this period still. You have to have the sign off from the release team. So 2 release team members, and then the design team and the localization team and the documentation team. The localization team only if the changes involve strings, but the documentation team has to be notified as well. So basically at the end of this week, you can expect GNOME to be pretty much done. GNOME 42 to be pretty much done. So we'll have to do a few releases there. I'll have to do a few releases there, to be honest. But yeah, so I don't expect merge requests in libadwaita to land at any point in time during the next 3 weeks. People are going to be super busy about everything else, even without looking at the state of the world. People are going to be busy doing something else. So I'm not going to be waiting here, just establishing eye contact with team maintainers to get stuff merged. Also because this is an API addition and we're already in API freeze, so no additions and no changes. But it's good to basically just push this stuff in early, so at the beginning of the next cycle, the maintainers have time to decompress with simple changes. Speaking of decompress, I have to take a little bit of a break, and I will be right back with more libadwaita changes there. So let's transition, and I will be right back. Oh, okay. I'm a little bit tired today. I'm more tired than I actually expected. I went to bed a little bit late last night. I'm staying up. Yeah, I'm staying up watching people play video games. I've been up watching a streamer playing Horizon Forbidden West because I don't have a PlayStation 5 and I don't plan to buy it. I'm not planning to buy a PlayStation 5. So the only way I can experience that game is actually watching somebody else play it. But yeah, last night was a 6-hour stream, which is, it ended at about what was that, 3 a.m. my time. So I went to bed after that. Let's just say coffee was necessary this morning. Lots of coffee. Like, imagine the end sequence in the Matrix with what do you need? Guns, lots of guns, and massive racks of guns. Yeah, that was me this morning with coffee. Racks and racks of coffee. Let's see. So if we switch to tag entry, I need to rebase the branch. Okay, so it should be okay. Yeah, it's gonna be fine. So our tagged entry merge request. Let's see. So the tagged entry merge request had a few, well, apart from missing functionality and missing design, open question and stuff like that, also had a few interesting points of feedback. Like, for instance, in this case, Alexander pointed out that most users of the tagged entry are search entries. So you have a search bar here, and then you have, with a couple of icons, and then you add tags there. And then Alan pointed out that people also use this case not just for search, but for things like, I don't know if it's there. Yeah, token fields like this, and chips like this. You're composing an email and you type in your email address, an email address, and then it will become an object there instead of being the name and email or stuff like that. And then you have chips in the material design here that almost look like names in the inside Matrix, for instance, Matrix UI. So element, stuff like that. And they also have a little icon there and stuff like that. Or I have nothing. So yeah, this almost look like a pill button, so they're not really there. So at this point, we are looking at something that doesn't really look Yeah, it doesn't really look that way. It doesn't really look like a tagged entry at all. So maybe we have to extract the tag bit and turn it into an actual widget that you embed into other widgets. And then you have a search entry, for instance, that let you add a tag. So yeah, and maybe we can call it chip at this point instead of calling it a tag. Or I'm very wary of using the term token, but maybe. So basically you have a tagged entry is like its own widget there. And then you add token field cell. This is such a mess. What the hell? Default known plane square rounded to square. Ugh. Relationship between designer and developer. Yeah. I mean, yeah, at this point we might reconsider the entire thing. Sorry, not reconsider the entire thing. We could reconsider part of the design. Instead of having an object that is like a tag, we could actually have a widget there that can be styled. Otherwise, we can go the Apple route. We still have a tag, or we can call it something else, like a token or a chip or whatever, that works like a toast. So you have an actual object that contains a bunch of widgets and a different style that is hard-coded, for instance, and then you can ask it to have a close button or an icon and blah blah blah, and an action. So it would look like a little bit like a toast. And then you have additional widgetry that basically let you add that tag or that object inside it and display it. So instead you have a tagged entry that behaves like an entry, and then you have a tagged search entry, or you have the search entry that allows you to add tags to it. So that's an interesting, yeah, that's an interesting variation, but it would also look a lot more like the Toast API, which is good. If you have, right, if you have similar components or components that behave similarly in some respect, it's good to have a similar API so that you can immediately transfer knowledge between one and the other. So yeah, maybe we should really have a tag object instead of a, well, also have a tagged entry, but have a tag object. So let's add a new file. And instead of calling tag, maybe we call it chip at this point. I don't know, like chipped entry. Let's call it tag for now. So, and then we will need, yeah, tagged entry header, and then we move it away. So we are going to add here. And we're going to cut it. And here. So okay. We are going to change this, and this one is also going to be this PDX file copyright. Always remove your email address from other files. Never ever. Never ever include your email address in a header file. People will open header files. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm literally getting emails from random stuff that I contributed to because I made the mistake of leaving my email address in there. I think I'm not getting as much email as somebody's actually sending, mostly because I used to use my work email address in various places, and that email address doesn't work anymore. But if I add like the GNOME.org email address, that will always work. Which means that people will send me email even though I don't really care about that. So that one goes away. Get label and set label is fine. Show close. Probably also want to add an ADW info G icon icon. And since we're using GIcon, at this point we need to include GIL. And then set action. Here. And then we need to set the action name like AW toast. Yeah, set action name and get action name. And maybe yeah, we probably need this entire API here. Because we want an action. Interface so that when people click the tag we can respond to it. This is mostly convenience API around the action. Okay. Yeah. So this looks a lot more similar to the this kind of API, this kind of like thing that we can do. So inside this object, then we will store widgetry and other stuff. So the close button, the icon, the label. That doesn't really matter for our purposes. And then we will have other API, like a search entry will then be able to add this kind of stuff here. And yeah, and then you can add like style classes or whatever. Yeah, then we can add details like yeah. Like in this case, yeah, it's an input. Yeah, it's an input chip. Let's call it that way. It's an input chip in material like parlance. So you get an icon, you get a label, and you get a close button. And when you start typing stuff, whenever it completes, it adds it to the left of the of that. You cannot do interleaved. So you cannot have like a tag here and then text and then a tag and then text. But you can complete, add it, and then whenever you want to remove it, you press the button here. The reason why I don't want to call it chips, even though it's kind of here, is because material design uses the same name for choices, which look a lot like toggle buttons, and for like for specific stuff. And this stuff looks a lot more like pill buttons. Yeah, this doesn't look like something like that. We are limiting ourselves to a very specific type of tag, that very specific type of use case, which is input chips. So yeah, it's more like the token field API inside AppKit. I don't have any example. Come on, Apple. I know you can do better than this. Come on. An example? Let's get a screenshot. Hi, Rednov. Yeah. Oh no, yeah. Daughter first. Always. Let's see. Token field example. No, there's nothing. Good. Oh. We have videos. Stack Overflow. Why is the token field delegate API on docs.microsoft.com? What the hell? Yeah, something like that. Nice. Anything? Looks like something that is fairly old, but yeah, maybe it's okay. So yeah, having something like this would match what other platforms do. Again, calling it chip and calling it token sounds like a misnomer to me. Let's keep it tag. We are still in time to rename it, but let's keep it tag. Okay, so we'll need to add a new file. It's going to be libadwaita tag.c, and we probably also want to have a private so that other widgets can access the internals, or at least have a private API to do that, because tagged entry, yeah, does a lot of stuff there. So we are going to move that into our source code. So it's going to be include.config private. There you go. Since we're using GTK, we're going to do include GTK page, and then we're going to add a widget. Probably gonna have to deal with something like this. Since we are removing it, we are going to drop a bunch of stuff. This becomes only a pure object there. We don't care about it. The parent is the back pointer is going to be the parent of the object here, parent of the tag container. We might want to have some additional styling there, but it's fine for now. The private, it's going to be here. And we're going to decide what to expose in our API. This one it's going to need this. Otherwise the macros for the versioning, for symbol versioning won't work. We don't have any num right now, so we don't need to add that. But yeah. Let me also add that to the Meson API, Meson build, header files here. How do we sort? Tag first. Okay. And then sources here. We don't need to add the private header file because Meson is not autotools and it keeps track of the headers. So it's a bit like Toast, as I was saying. We are going to need also all this stuff here: action target and action name. Actually, we are going to remove this stuff because the widgetry is going to be instantiated by whatever uses the tag. So we actually don't need this at all. But we are going to use the G icon. So we don't actually need the show icon boolean. So we're gonna have a label, an icon, and whether or not to show the close button. So let's move this in the same order here. And then it's gonna have an action name and an action target. And that's it. And everything else is going to be instantiated whenever we add the tag to the widget that will display it. So it's going to be a more generic kind of API. Which is going to be useful after that because we'll be able to style widgets ourselves instead of having to style them depending on the tag object there. Let's go back to the tagged entry API. We'll have to redo a lot of this stuff, but it's going to be fine. And then we are going to remove this. And we are going to remove the close clip because And the dispose, we are going to remove all of this here. The name is fine. It's gone as well, and we're going to clear object to self. We're also going to have to free the action name and the action target there. The name is gone. We're going to add more there. This one goes away. So one of the things that we are going to do is, instead of having so if you show close, if you show the close button, instead of having an actual button that does something, it's going to be part of the view object that we are going to, the view widget that we're going to construct out of the tag object instance. So we don't have to care about all of that anymore. But the other thing that we will do is probably use an action instead of having like an actual clicked signal. We'll activate an action on the button whenever you press it. So we're gonna remove this as well, and here. We don't care anymore about this stuff, and we are not going to show any of this, use any of this. The name accessor is also gone. We are only gonna keep the label, show close there. Perfect. And then we're gonna add the rest of the accessors there. Label icon. I want to look at toast in order to see. Yeah, there is no additional interface. We have to implement that ourselves. So the tag is going to have action name, action target. And we are actually going to copy what libadwaita toast does, so we don't have to deal with custom stuff, and we are going to keep instead close to keep the documentation close. These are not strictly necessary anymore, so we might as well get rid of them, because newer versions of libadwaita will be built against newer version of GObject introspection, and GObject introspection automatically binds the properties to its accessor functions. So And then we're going to show the icon as well, so we're gonna have it there. Our string is an object and it's of type G type icon, and that's it. Since it's going to be 1.2, yeah, we are just defining this stuff as basically as a model object. It doesn't do anything except store a bunch of data. And then we create the widgetry that reflects the state of the model. And it will use stuff like GObjectBindProperty to immediately reflect changes inside the label, or whether or not to show the close button or the icon, whatever. So the icon is empty, the label okay, and we notify if the label changes, and we notify as well here. We also have to construct the tags now. We cannot construct them from another place like we had in the older design. So at this point we do this. So yeah, this looks a lot like a Toast API, the Toast API, which is good because people will be able to understand the use case at this point. You cannot add a Toast everywhere. Toast is very specific. It has other functionality, but a tag is something similar. So you should have a similar API. Okay. Right. At this point, we want to create a reflection of that tag. So we will have yeah, something like this. This kind of works for me. So we do this is the model object and this is the view here. we still store, instead of storing all of the stuff, store it here. And then we have a, so we have a list of tags here, but we also need a mapping. So we store all the tag objects inside the list model, but we map those tag objects to the actual widgets. So we can always go from one to the other. It's always mapped to a name as well. So it's gonna be fine there. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, tagged entry, yeah. And then we want to flip. There. And since it's not a private type anymore, we make it out like that. Yeah, it's gonna be slightly different from there on. Yeah, it's gonna be something like this. Yeah, something like this. So you create a tag there. It's gonna have to be a bunch of stuff removed there. And this will have to clear the hash table as well. But for the rest, it's very similar. Or maybe, yeah, we can probably change it a little bit. Do something like that. Name like this. And the internal API that we call from both the buildable implementation and the public API is going to be different. The ownership transfer is also going to be, we'll have to look at the ownership transfer there. How do as far as I remember, the add toast on the toast overlay, the API for adding a toast is transfer full. Yep. Yeah. So it takes complete ownership of the object, just like we do here. Something like this. So since we acquire the complete ownership, we don't need to do unref tag or whatever. There you go. So we add a tag here inside the store, so we always have a list of tags. And then we have to create the object. We create a widget tree. By having function like this. First of all, we remove. Yeah, we need to have a couple of back pointers there. So back pointer, the pointer to the object, the name, and then the widget tree there. The other option is to have a tag widget, like toast widget here, which is another option. So instead of having basically just inheriting a widget, for instance, so we don't have to have a map because we can store the tag widgets directly inside the list model. Yeah, that's another option. Something like this. Yeah, this would be copying that. Sorry about that. Ah, bots. Gotta love them. Yeah, I think this approach is a little bit better. So we create a tag widget, which is the representation of a tag. We can also do a bunch of stuff like using a UI file instead of constructing this stuff manually. And then whenever we add a new tag, we create a tag widget and we add the tag widget to the list model, so that we are always mapped to that. And the tag widget also has a pointer to the tag. So whenever we remove the widget, when we unparent it from the actual entry, then it will also remove the tag. Yeah. Or at the very least, in terms of data structure, we can probably deal with that differently than using list model, for instance, or something like that. Yeah. But that will have to wait. That will have to wait until Wednesday because it's getting late, and I think in terms of design, it's probably a better approach. So let's go back to my begin. yeah. So today I've worked a little bit on libadwaita, and I opened a new merge request for some convenience API. And basically started the redesign of the tag entry API after a round of review from both the design team and the libadwaita maintainer. And I think I landed on a reasonable design that maps a little bit to the Toast API that already exists, which is good, and makes it a little bit more generic so that we can have multiple widgets that use the same API for tags, not just search entries, but also generic text inputs that can be augmented by widgetry that replaces the text that you just entered, which is similar to what other platforms already have, like Android and iOS and AppKit and on Apple hardware. Next time, I'm going to be implementing that design. So it's going to take a while, and I will have to be focused on that. So hopefully by Wednesday, we will have something that is reasonably useful and reasonably close to what I envisioned this. And it's probably also going to be easier to style. So we'll see on Wednesday and Friday what we can do with that. So if you like what I've done today and what I've done in the past weeks, then why not subscribe to my YouTube channel? I upload the VODs of these streams. Otherwise, you can join me live on Twitch, twitch.tv/ibassi. So have a great rest of your day, and thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking with me during this stream. I will publish the VOD for the streams of next week later today. I have like 3 in the pipeline. They were waiting on the stream for Monday that I had to re-edit and do some stuff there. So it's taking me a while. Sorry about that. I will try and publish it as soon as I can, and then I'll publish this one. But yeah, if you enjoy watching me struggle with the implementation and documentation of the GNOME application development platform, then again, feel free to subscribe to my Twitch channel. You'll get notified as soon as I get online and I start streaming. So again, have a great rest of your day, and I shall see you all on Wednesday. Bye.